Hello, Mr. Mack-Poole, and today we are going to be looking at two consequences of the collapse of the Soviet Union. This is for try now 1. So if you got under 7 marks for this, I'm very stern, I know, but if you got under 7 out of 8 for this, we are going to be looking at this again. So explain 2 consequences of the collapse of the Soviet Union. So let's go for a little refresher first before we go through this with regard to both skills and content. So 1 second. Right, sorry. For some reason, I've got a little bit of a delay. Here we go. Brilliant. Okay. Share this. There we go. Brilliant. Okay. So, discussing the consequences. So, when you think I'll say it again. When you think like a historian, and you answer a question on consequences, think of who. Who are these consequences for? Was it for the leaders of a country? Was the public? Is it both? Can you mention both? Where are these consequences felt? Which country? Is it international? Are they global? Are they regional? Are they national? Are they localized? Where are these consequences for? Where are these consequences for? And last, when? When was this consequence felt? Is it a long-term consequence? Is it a short-term consequences? Again, is it both? So these are ways to think like a historian. So when you're going through this answer, who, where, when, really good way to tackle this answer. Okay, so let's have a little refresher right now. Oh yeah, and sorry, these are the skills you need to show. So a historian, an expert, will be looking at your answer and they'll be trying to see if you either get 2 or 3 or 4 out of 4. So if you want to get 4 out of 4, you need to make sure you've actually explained and analysed a consequence and use specific information about the topic, which is added to support the explanation. Okay, showing good knowledge and understanding of the period. So AO1 and AO2. Okay, now let's have a look, shall we? Without further ado, so I'm going to give you a little refresher on the fall of the USSR. So what are the causes of the fall of the USSR? Well, the period of stagnation under Brezhnev from 1964 to 1982. Now, Brezhnev is one of the most important significant individuals on this course, if not the most, because he's in charge for the longest amount of time. Now, a swathe of this time, which is from 1969 to 1979, which is the détente period, but don't think it was all happy clappy and friendly. So his socio-economic stagnation is contrasted by the USA's economic miracle, economic boom of the 1980s under Reagan. So Reagan follows both an aggressive foreign policy and his Reaganomic system, which means he can invest more into arms. And this arms race really, you could say, is a key cause of the fall of the USSR. Because the USSR had to invest so much money into armaments, that meant they couldn't really fund better socio-economic conditions for their citizens. Also, the USSR had a loosening grip on the Eastern Bloc. This made the Soviet Union seem a lot weaker, okay, to anti-communist rebels in Russia. And also there was a Russian fatigue with living conditions. If you were a citizen of Russia, you know, you couldn't buy many things that we just take for granted in the West, like Levi jeans or a McDonald's, okay? So those lack of freedoms meant there was a fatigue amongst a lot of people who didn't really feel aligned to communism. So what are the events? Well, the big thing that leads to the fall of the USSR, in my opinion, the spark, is the military coup. So there's some hardline communists, and they want to get rid of Gorbachev because Gorbachev wants his perestroika and his glasnost and his perestroika, and I really should have put that in causes there. But Gorbachev had enacted some very pro-Western and capitalist reforms. Okay, and this was not popular with some hardline communists. However, the coup wasn't completely supported. The armed forces were divided. Now, the Air Force did not support the coup. And also, you had key figures within Russia itself, like Boris Yeltsin. Boris Yeltsin was a reformer. He wanted change in the Soviet Union. Now, he was a figure that was against the hardline communists. Now, the following day after the coup, many Russians campaigned against it. There were strikes. There was even firing amongst pro-coup troops and anti-coup troops. And it's quite clear that the coup was not successful. Now, what are the consequences of this? Well, did you see, by the way, how we've gone from the Soviet Union to Russia? Yeah. Okay, so the major consequence, I guess, is that, a couple of months after this failed coup, is that well, the USSR does fall, and the consequence of that fall is that you've got 15 new nations. Okay, you've got Russia, the Russian Federation. You've got Ukraine, which is very topical, which was pledged to be neutral between the West and Russia. Okay, so those 15 new nations, that's a major, major change. So the Soviet Union, which was so large and so powerful, encompassed so many people. Well, Russia, which was the mainstay of that, was a shell of its former self, nowhere near as powerful. And in geopolitical terms, in world political terms, Russia has really slid down in kind of importance until recent events with regard to geopolitics. Now, also, Russia gets a new leader. So when Gorbachev resigns from the presidency of the Soviet Union, Boris Yeltsin is the new leader. Now, while he does oversee democratic and capitalist reforms, he was also quite unpopular because he was an alcoholic who seemed to embarrass his nation with just constantly zany, silly dances, swaying, falling over, making silly and crude jokes. And he also oversaw a lot of corruption in Russia with regard to the emergence of oligarchs. Now, one of these oligarchs that emerged was Roman Abramovich. Now, a lot of these super rich people that emerged from the ashes of the Soviet Union were, in fact, old KGB agents. Now, you should know that KGB is essentially what we might call like MI5 here. It was a spy network. So you've got these shady spies who take a lot of wealth. So the consequences, they weren't altogether positive. And if you look at the long-term consequence, that once again, later down the road, the USSR, or sorry, Russia and NATO are at loggerheads over Ukraine, that Boris Yeltsin was seen to be a Western puppet and was replaced by Vladimir Putin. These long-term consequences for the world really haven't been a net positive, have they? Even despite the fact that in the short term, things did look quite bright. Initially, when Yeltsin was the leader of Russia, he had very good relations with the West, and also there was a lot of investment from the West into Russia. A great example of that would be the Pizza Hut advert, which Gorbachev himself was in, advertising that there was change in Russia and that you could social economic conditions could improve. But that short-term hope has been really replaced by a longer-term friction, which has re-emerged between Russia and the West. Okay, and I'm going to stop it on that note, and you can now complete your questions. That would be great. Thank you. Stop recording.